Welcome. This PowerPoint is about the history and evolution of sleep medicine. You should also be reading your Atlas Volume 1, pages 1 through 7, as that gives a much more detailed and concise look at these topics. Let's go on to our next slide. This is just a timeline of the events that I'm going to cover in this PowerPoint. Notice they start as far back as the 1800s and continue on to today. Starting in the 1800s, back in 1809 and 1822, Rolando, then Florence, found that after removing the cerebral hemispheres of birds, that they remained in a state of sleepiness. So that was an opening to the sleep medicine field. In 1836, Charles Dickens first describes obstructive sleep apnea in the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club. Dickens describes Joe as an excessively sleepy, overweight boy who snored, and this is what most people commonly think of as an obstructive sleep apnea patient. Although that's not 100% correct, it's a well accepted picture anyway. Let's go on to our next slide. In 1929, Berger finds differences in brain activity between sleep and wakefulness by recording electrical impulses. This led to the use of the electroencephalogram, or EEG, to evaluate brain function. In 1937, Loomis, Harvey, and Hobart classify sleep into 5 different stages. And in 1939, Kleitman publishes Sleep and Wakefulness, which led to continued sleep research. In 1950s and 60s, Kramer and Hoffman both used birds and light to prove the presence of an inborn biological clock, which we now call the circadian rhythm. In 1962, Aschoff and Weaver proved that human rhythm lasts slightly longer than 24 hours. And in 1965, obstructive sleep apnea is discovered. In the 1970s is really where we see a big boom in the sleep medicine field. In 1970, William Dement established the first sleep center research center in California, and that was the first sleep school. In 1972, Moore and Eichler and Stephen and Zucker, both groups, identified the suprachiasmatic nuclei, also known as our internal clock, although both groups did so separately. During this time, tracheostomies were first being used to treat obstructive sleep apnea. In 1978, the APT was established for sleep technologists. That was the first professional organization for sleep technologists. And in 1979, insomnia is recognized. In the 1980s to 1990s is where the therapeutics for sleep apnea really began to come into play. In 1981, CPAP was first used for sleep apnea. In 1982, a specific peptide was identified that could induce sleep. In 1996, genes are found to interact and coordinate as a functional unit, as they pertain to sleep anyway. Let's go on to the next slide. In the 2000s, sleep medicine continues to grow. Innovations for therapeutic options for sleep apnea and other sleep disorders continue. Consequences of sleep apnea and other disorders of sleep continue to be recognized and studied. Although the gold standard for diagnosing sleep disorders is by testing in sleep disorder centers, exploration into the validity and safety of in-home testing is being explored. Most sleep physicians would agree that coming to a sleep center and having a complete sleep test done, polysomnogram done, is the best method for getting accurate results for patients. However, due to changes in the economy and health insurance, some people are still exploring the in-home testing, and some people do them, although the accuracy is still under question. Let's go on to our next slide. Our current basic knowledge of sleep, this is just a brief introduction here, but sleep is a process necessary to ensure normal physiological, mental, and emotional functions during waking hours. In the development of the central nervous system, sleep provides a foundation for the development of normal alertness, attention, and productive wakefulness. Perturbations in the development of sleep mechanisms in early childhood pose a higher risk for problem with attention, alertness, and emotional well-being later in life. Sleep is a necessary healing and recovery state. If sleep is abnormal, the consequences can be psychological or physical illness or even death. Treatment of sleep disorders improves physical well-being and can be instrumental in the treatment of medical and psychiatric diseases. These are just some basic topics that are currently accepted knowledge regarding sleep. Let's go on to our next slide. This is just wanted to give you a picture of what the equipment I learned on, which is your picture on your left, compared to the type of equipment you'll be using, which is a picture on your right. In the picture on your left, notice under the machine there's a cardboard box, and that is full of paper that reams up to the top of the machine. That would hold about 1,000 sheets of paper, and in one night study you would go through approximately 800 to 1,000 sheets of paper to record your patient's polysomnogram. That's what I learned on. There were 17 to 21 pens, literally ink pens, that went across the machine, and sometimes those pens would get clogged at night, and I would have to unclog them in order to keep my polysomnogram running and to get a good, accurate representation of my patient's sleep. Today, you all will be using computers with monitors and digital recordings, and then that's all gets to be saved on a hard drive or on a disk, what have you. So just the equipment alone has changed tremendously over the years in sleep. Let's go on to our next slide. Since the 1970s, the standard measurements for sleep diagnostics haven't changed a whole lot. The standards include having electrodes on the central lobe of the brain, occipital lobes of the brain, eye muscles, chin muscles, respiratory effort, respiratory airflow, heart or EKG, and then the limbs, which is typically the legs only. Today, additional recording parameters are often used as well, and some include snore sensors, esophageal transducers, thermocouples, thermistors, and a few others. They've actually added 2 extra leads on the brain for EEG as well. Sleep medicine continues to grow with innovative technology for sleep diagnosis and therapeutics, and we really have to find a nice balance between the two, a balance between maintaining an accurate study and accurate data, and keeping our practice easy using technology. So let's go on to our next slide. I just wanted to take a few moments to review some of the professional organizations that you're going to be encountering and that you should be aware of what their purpose is. The first one is the American Association of Sleep Technologists. This was founded in 1978 as the APT, Association of Polysomnographic Technologists, and has recently changed in the past few years to the AAST. The mission is to promote and advance sleep technology profession through the continual development of educational, technical, and clinical excellence in sleep disorders. Their vision is to preserve the autonomy and future of the sleep technology profession by providing educational and professional pathways with innovative approaches that promote professional growth and development. So as you go through the program and once you become a professional technologist, this professional organization is to help support you. You'll be able to look to them for educational meetings and clinics to help maintain your educational requirements to keep your credentials. Let's go on to our next slide. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the AASM, their vision, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, is the leader in setting standards and promoting excellence in sleep medicine, healthcare, education, and research. Their mission is to serve its members and advance the field of sleep healthcare by setting the clinical standards for the field of sleep medicine, advocating for recognition, diagnosis, and treatment of sleep disorders, educating professionals dedicated to providing optimal sleep healthcare, and fostering the development and application of scientific knowledge. I consider the AAST to be a professional organization to support sleep technologists. I consider the AASM as a professional organization to promote and to support sleep physicians and all other professionals working in sleep medicine. So I kind of find the AST falls under the AASM if you want to think of it in that sense. Let's go on to our next slide. The BRPT, or the Board of Registered Polysomnographic Technologists, this is who you will apply to get your credentials through. The mission of the BRPT is to build upon its history as the global leader in sleep technologist credentialing and certification, to provide high-quality sleep technology products and services that inspire professional excellence, recognition, and lifelong learning, and to create long-term value for credential and certificate holders. The vision of the BRPT sets the professional standard worldwide for the credentialing of technologists and technicians in the field of sleep medicine. Let's go on to our next slide. The COA-PSG. This is the committee that recommends polysomnographic education programs receive accreditation from CAHEP. CAHEP is the largest programmatic accreditor in the health sciences field. In collaboration with its committees on accreditation, which would be COA-PSG, CAHEP reviews and accredits over 2,000 educational programs in 23 health science occupations. The program here at SAC is accredited by CAHEP upon the recommendation of the COA-PSG. We are looking in 2017, we need to reapply for accreditation. So we initially got accreditation, and I believe they granted it to us for 10 years, and we will reapply here in 2017. Let's go on to our next slide. Just a quick overview. Sleep is necessary. Sleep affects every organ in our body, and every organ in our body can have some effect on sleep. Let's go on to our next slide. This is just to give you an idea where we're going to be going throughout the quarter. This isn't really anything you need to do for this week's assignment, but the current process in diagnosing sleep disorders, the patient or the patient's spouse seeks help from a doctor. Maybe they go to the doctor and complain that my spouse says I snore, or maybe they complain that I fall asleep but wake up frequently. I have difficulty falling asleep. I feel more tired when I wake up than when I went to sleep the night before. All of these are statements that would prompt a physician to consider the patient may have a problem with their sleep, whether it's sleep apnea or some other sleep disorder. After that, the patient's referred to a sleep medicine clinic or physician. Upon having a physical done by a sleep physician, the patient will have a first night or diagnostic sleep study, which we call a polysomnogram. After that study, after the data is gathered, it's then sent to another sleep technologist who will score the information. After it's scored and the data is collected, then that data goes on back to the sleep physician for interpretation and diagnosis and a treatment plan. After that, the patient goes back to their sleep physician, gets their results, and if they have sleep apnea, which is the typical scenario we see, then the patient returns back to the sleep lab for a second sleep study, which we would then call a therapeutic sleep study, because this is when we would apply some type of positive pressure therapy or other device to try and treat their sleep apnea, if that be the case. Let's go on to our next slide. The ideal process in diagnosing sleep disorders. In a perfect world, all medical practitioners would inquire about a patient's sleep. This includes pediatricians, psychologists, cardiologists, general practitioners, pulmonologists, allergists. The list goes on and on. Any physician should inquire about their patient's sleep. However, very few actually do. Currently, medical schools average only about 2 hours of sleep medicine education for their entire time in medical school. So sleep is a very, very new field, and very few physicians out there have incorporated it into the standard of practice. However, more are doing so. After a practitioner inquires about their patient's sleep, then they would refer their patient on to a sleep physician or sleep center for further evaluation and diagnosis, which again, some physicians do. More times than not, though, the patient has a complaint, which then prompts the physician to consider sending them for an evaluation, where it should be the physician should be asking them about their sleep and then sending them on if needed. Let's go on to our next slide. I just made this slide just to give you an idea of the most common sleep disorders out there. We are going to learn about a lot more throughout the quarter and throughout the program, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the most common. Notice insomnia is actually the most common disorder, and that's not really a sleep disorder, it's more of an awake disorder because they can't fall asleep. Approximately 1/3 of Americans suffer from insomnia, and to have this evaluated or treating, it's typically not reimbursed by insurance. The typical complaints of an insomniac or someone suffering insomnia would be difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep, waking up too early in the morning, or complaining of unrefreshing sleep. The next most common sleep disorder would be obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. And actually, I use the term OSA, but really I'm encompassing all sleep disordered breathing, and that includes central sleep apnea, hypopneas, respiratory related arousals, obesity, hypoventilation syndrome. I'm kind of encompassing them all under OSA, but about 4 to 9% of all 30 to 60-year-olds have OSA. It affects men, women, children, and the elderly. It is a known culprit in cardiovascular disease. Treatment of obstructive sleep apnea does improve cardiovascular health. People with neuromuscular disease, maxillofacial abnormalities, and those with cardiovascular disease are at a higher risk for developing obstructive sleep apnea. Another sleep disorder that you may have heard of and that we will talk about is narcolepsy, and this is characterized by the inability to maintain wakefulness. Wakefulness and sleep are not organized in the central nervous system, and so it acts faulty. They don't fall asleep when they should, and they can't stay awake when they should. This is fairly a rare condition, to be honest. Restless leg syndrome and periodic leg movement syndrome, these are two different things, but these are very common. Both of them are very common in various age groups and with other conditions. So this was just an overview of some of the common sleep disorders that we're going to be covering this quarter. You don't need to do anything about this for this week's assignment. All right, that should wrap up this PowerPoint.